Do you want to go for it then? You seem to have something interesting in the tea break.
So this is my
no pressure, but just if you want to.
This is my first time hearing non-duality, and I feel similarities to the power of now, presence, being in the present moment. It's almost like that feels like an entry point to what you're talking about.
Yeah, okay.
Are you familiar with that? And do you
Yes.
feel there is similarities there?
No.
No. And if not, why?
Well, there are connections, of course there are connections, but I think there's also kind of a great gulf as well. So the two things that I say, one is that of course the power of now, central to it there is something for you to do. And I think that's partly what accounts for its enormous popularity. A popularity of which I am, of course, fantastically jealous. So you shouldn't really trust anything that I say about it, but nevertheless I will go on. So there's a technique there. There's kind of, I'm going to call it loosely, and whilst doing this, air quotations, a psychotherapeutic technique, spiritual, if you like, transpersonal technique. I'm not knocking the technique, but it's a technique. It's a way of dealing with some of the pains and sorrows of apparently being human, apparently being a separate individual. I think it's oversold. I think people who buy into it sometimes put too much reliance on it. And probably it's also helpful to people in some circumstances as well. So I'm kind of like not knocking it, and I am knocking it both. I kind of want to have my cake and eat it. So I don't think it connects to what we're talking about here in that way. There's no suggestion here that, if you practice the power of now, somehow this will get you closer to that which you cannot get close to. And let's also remind ourselves that there is no you anyway, who can get anywhere. So that's one thing. And the other thing I find interesting about it is that if you know Eckhart Tolle's story of his own awakening, has absolutely nothing to do with that. And I find that, in a way, a puzzle. I'm being a bit disingenuous when I say I find it a puzzle, because I think, there is an explanation for it. But I think, as quite often in these cases, it has nothing to do with Eckhart Tolle's awakening, so I don't really have a clue as to why he's kind of recommending it, except as a kind of psychotherapy light, as I call it. That's L-I-T-E, like Miller Lite beer. A sort of psychotherapy light, which might make some of life's sorrows a bit less burdensome. As I understand it, Eckhart Tolle had a spontaneous awakening after some years of very, very deep depression. So as a kind of recommendation to people, I suppose the recommendation would be, well, become as deeply depressed as you possibly can be for at least 2 years, and then there'll be an awakening. But I mean, that's obviously nonsense, isn't it? So on those two grounds, I'd say it's not really very similar to what's happening here. But it is, of course, immensely popular. Why not? This is very much to do with this character. I'm not that person. In myself, I'm not that keen on, kind of. Well, I call it psychotherapy light as public spectacle. So you get a large number of people in a room, and then if I get picked, I get the microphone, and I can stand up and talk about how angry I am with my mother, and I can get a little bit of light kind of therapy from the speaker, and then I feel good and I sit down. I'm not that keen on that, but that's just me. So no, I don't really have an opinion. Have I been terribly bitchy there? I'm asking myself. It doesn't matter. Who cares? But yeah. So I feel like where this is being spoken about, really being talked about, there's nothing on offer. And I kind of can never, whenever I say that, I can never resist pointing out the kind of ambiguity there. There's nothing on offer, there's nothing on offer. Maybe there's nothing on offer. The mind can't help maybe feeling that. If I as a seeker go to a talk, I know there's nothing on offer, but maybe there's a part of me that can't help hoping perhaps I'll get nothing from this. That's a positive nothing, not a negative nothing. Yes. But that's just the mind. But there's nothing on offer here. Not for the seeker. There's the suggestion that maybe seeking might end, but nothing on offer. Do you want to come back on that or not? Or is that okay? Yeah. Needless to say, I'd kill for Eckhart Tolle's audiences and viewing figures, and we'll see whether that bit gets cut out of the video or not.
It's quite hard to reconcile that psychology, your psychology of envy, with the contention that he's offering something and you're not.
Can you spell that out a bit more? Are you talking, sorry, is this a comment on my own professed envy?
Yeah.
Which may, and I'm not saying it was, but which may have been a joke, but anyway, go on.
No, clearly it was a joke, but let's suppose the jokes contain some truth in them.
Oh God, yes. Let's psychoanalyze this video. Oh my God.
But if you're envious of Eckhart,
Yeah.
then it kind of indicates that you think you're playing the same game. You're competing in a league with him in the same game.
It would, wouldn't it?
It would indicate
were
that.
it to be true.
Yeah, were it to be true.
Yeah.
Maybe it is true.
Oh, yeah, maybe.
True to the character,
Yeah.
anyway.
True to the character.
Yeah. Yeah, I'll comment on that after another 6 months of psychoanalysis. Yeah. No, also, I don't want to suggest in any way that, when this is seen, envy might not arise. It might. Could be a Lamborghini that passes by in the street. This isn't about any particular character, any particular character trait, in the same way that it's not about any particular feelings arising or anything like that. I have suggested that there are certain feelings that may not arise when this is seen, but I've also made the point that they're not genuine feelings. They're what some therapists would call pseudo feelings. Yeah. I mean, this isn't about anything that the mind might construe as good character or moral character or anything like that. Surely the good character cannot be envious or anything, nothing like that. No, nothing. That's the freedom. That's the freedom. Part of it. Freedom from any kind of imprisoning concepts like this. The breath of freedom. Something I quote a lot, and I'm still annoyed with myself that I can't remember who wrote or said that, because it's so wonderful. And I've Googled it, and I can't come across it, but I did not imagine it. There is something of the breath of freedom blowing through Advaita. Somebody, once upon a time, actually wrote that, and I can't find it on Google too. I think Google's determinedly dualistic. It won't give me the answer to that. But it's wonderful. There's something of the breath of freedom. Freedom from constriction, freedom from constraint, freedom from what the mind considers to be necessary rules and moralities. Freedom from judgments. That doesn't mean, the character might still be very judgmental. That's possible. And yet there's a level on which Advaita is free of judgments. The lightning flashes, the eye blinks, then you have either seen or you have not seen. That's about the only bit of the Upanishads I can quote, which is why I quote it so often. It's wonderful. That's it, that's awakening. The lightning flashes, the eye blinks, and it can be missed. It can be missed. And if it's missed, well, tough. So what? Says the anonymous author of whichever Upanishad that's from, and I can't remember which. I wouldn't get away with that in a Buddhist seminar, would I? Quoting bits of Buddhist texts and having no idea whatsoever where they were from. What is that? Which bit of the Pali canon is that from? How can you trust the translation? Yeah, it's wonderful. The lightning flashes, the eye blinks. That's a really good description of an initial awakening, which can literally be, it's timeless, but I guess in the story of time, it could be a split second, but a split second that changes everything. And nothing. It may change nothing about the dream, about what's apparently arising in the dream, and yet it may change everything about the orientation of the apparent perceiver towards the dream. And may usher in, by the way, a period of profound despair, which I think we would mention in the first half. And that despair arises from the seeing that there is not nothing I can do, but it's worse than that, there is no I who can do anything.
Just thinking, so if there is nothing we can do about awakening, how are we to live?
Well, it's not there's nothing we can do about awakening, it's that there is no one who does anything. All right? So if we then just take that on to your question, so what was the question precisely?
How are we to live?
How are we to live? We are not to live. You are not living. Life happens. So the question kind of dissolves, because again, what happens is what happens, but it's always been like that. So up to that point, you may feel, believe, have the sensation that you are making choices about how to live according to some moral structure, because the question, how are we to live, invites the assumption that there's a moral structure within which we can make this decision. Right? And so the suggestion from there is, yeah, that's how it may have seemed until the moment of awakening, but that was also always an illusion. There was never anyone deciding, here is a moral dilemma, now what shall I do about it? The question of how should we live, it's fascinating, it's wonderful. There's a wonderful book about, I think there's a wonderful book about Montaigne called something like How to Live. 1 question and 21 answers. Absolutely wonderful. Highly recommend it for some philosophical amusement. But it kind of, here where it kind of dissolves. There is no one who's living. There is no one making these decisions. Morality collapses. You could, if you like, say there's a kind of natural morality. If we're not psychopaths, then there is empathy. That's natural. Empathy produces certain kinds of behaviour. That's natural. If there's psychopathy, then there's no empathy, and then there's a different kind of behaviour. That also is natural, although thankfully more rare. And then we turn this into morality. Ugh, morality, it's horrible. Almost invariably makes people behave worse than they would do without it. There's a wonderful quote by Steven Weinberg, I think it was, who's a Nobel Prize-winning physicist. There will always be good people who do good things and evil people who do evil things, but to get good people to do evil things, for that you need religion. Wonderful. So that, yeah, morality, what should I do? What's the good thing? What's the right thing? Something will happen. And that will depend on the apparent character. Yeah. But there's a startling, there is, because there are no rules about this, but there may be a startling collapse in a kind of, particularly in a rigid moral framework. I think I mentioned before the tea break in the possibility of this kicking up quite a lot of shit in your personal relationships, and that might be one reason, that if you have shared a rigid morality with somebody else, particularly let's say with your partner, and you're no longer interested in whatever it might be, what particular kind of vicious piece of nastiness that you want to engage in order to prove your moral superiority over other people, if that collapses, you might then find that it's impossible for the relationship to continue. Just one possibility. Yeah. You see, there's something about this message, this communication, which in a way, it keeps, or rather it should keep, those who are very morally uptight away. There should be the sense that, I'm not going to go near that, that's very dangerous, and so forth. But, the tiger of non-duality is so weird, who knows whose head it may seize and drag to one of these meetings. It might drag the most moralistic evangelical preacher in the world to a meeting like this. It's not likely, but it's possible. On that topic, and it is vaguely on that topic, I was listening to a very interesting radio programme in the Story of Time some years ago, interviewing this he'd been an evangelical pastor in a sort of small town in America, right? And he had, I suppose in a way you could say, worked out, loving God, blah, 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 there can't be hell. It's ridiculous. It just makes no sense at all.
Yeah.
Just mad, really. So he just worked this out somehow, or had a revelation. So he started preaching this. He was thrown out of the church. He was forced to leave the church, just for preaching that there wasn't an everlasting hell for sinners.
Don't let the truth get in the way of my dogmas. How dare you?
I like that. Don't let the truth get in the way of my dogma. No, absolutely. Yeah. Although again, I wouldn't use the word truth here. It's a dangerous, tricky word. Yeah. This is just a description of what is, whereas truth always seems to be to do with the mind. A story, it shouldn't be, but a story in the mind,
Yeah. I remember a group I was involved with many years ago that had a teaching that one of the important things about is that it is the way it is.
Absolutely.
And not the way it isn't.
Absolutely.
And it's surprising how many people's minds want it to be how it isn't.
Yeah.
I think it is how it is.
Yeah. Well, I quite often comment on this, you see. It is what it is. They've done surveys of what are the most hated phrases in the English language, and coming out top, and I think probably unsurprisingly, is you wouldn't understand. Yeah, sure, yeah, I can understand why that is the most hated phrase in the English language, but surprisingly, I can't remember if it's number 2 or 3, it is what it is. That's one of the 3 most hated phrases. That's bonkers, it's lovely. It is what it is. Well, I mean, you can understand that it is often said in a dismissive way and da 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 da. So I'm being a bit disingenuous when I say I can't understand. But said not in a narky way, it's lovely. It is what it is. What else is there to be said about it? But the mind hates it is what it is because it wants a story. It is what it is, doesn't. Everything that's put into words is a story, but it is what it is. It's not much of a story. It's not much to build on. It's like a bit like kind of non-duality.
It does bring you
Catholic
to free.
theology, Catholic theology, this enormous edifice, I don't know, I'm continuing this absurd metaphor. Catholic theology, this enormous edifice with turrets and spiral staircases. Non-duality, a mud hut maybe.
By the Ganges.
Whatever, yeah, that might be culturally appropriate, yeah, whatever, yeah.
You used the phrase earlier, life just happens.
Yeah,
Life is just happening.
yes.
To me, that connotes a sense of passivity.
No, that's because, it might not be because, but it suggests that that's the interpretation that the personal mind would put on it. No, life's just happening. There's no one who's passive. How can it denote passivity? There's no one who can be passive. There's no one who can be active. Life just happens. There may be a character there who, in terms of the drama, we were talking in the tea break a bit about this being like a play on stage. There may be a character there, and their part in the drama, their part in this particular Shakespearean comedy or tragedy, whichever it is to be passive. I've come across characters who are very passive, or it may be their part is to be active, or to be first passive and then to be active. I just described in 5 seconds, the whole bloody 5 acts of Hamlet there. Passive character, can't bring himself to do anything, ends up killing everybody. But that's just the character. And then another character, or the same character, might make a judgment about that. It's bad to be passive, it's better to be active. That's the characters in the play unfolding.
What is coming here is like how the brain is always trying to work things out. And then, as we talking before about hope, and then what came was like death. I know we're not saying a physical thing, but it came because when someone dies, there isn't anything you can do. That's it. And then the brain kind of keeps trying to figure it out. So then the guilt come, or if I had done that thing that way, it's unbelievable, like how the brain, I don't know what it is, but it's always like an energy trying to work things out.
Yeah.
Isn't it?
The mind, which doesn't really exist, the mind, which is really just a flow of energy, a flow of thoughts and sensations, depends on the mind, be continually trying to work stuff out, and rerunning the past, and is there something that I could have done, and could I have done this differently, and if I'd done this differently, this might have happened, blah, 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 blah. Yeah, that's the mind. Story making.
Yeah.
Revisiting the past endlessly.
Yeah.
Revisiting the past, air quotations, endlessly.
Yeah, like dreams, and it's really,
Yeah. And then it's seen that there's no mind, there's no past. It's just
a rising of whatever.
And in this, those thoughts and feelings of whatever associated with the past, nostalgia, guilt, whatever might arise. But they're less likely to arise when the self has collapsed. the apparent power, or the power in the story of that thought stream that we call the mind, I mean, it's incredible. You know, the power of the past, which can only exist as a thought in the apparent mind, and the future, whatever it might be, let's make it negative, you know, guilt and fear. It might be something positive, it doesn't matter really. But the power of that is incredible, when in a way, I mean, I know in a way this is very challenging, but in another way it's completely obvious. You know, I think I started with this at the beginning of this afternoon. There is just this. There's no time. It's just this. How long is this? There's no time. Well, surely there's at least half a second or a second to experience it, but no. I mean, how long is... There's just this. And in a way, I submit, and you may well throw this back at me and say, no, it's not like that at all, but I submit that in a way that is in the realm of the bleeding obvious, that there's just this. No past, no future. How long is this? A second, half a second? No, it's just this. It's like this sliver between non-existence and non-existence. Continuity, you might say, it's a bit fanciful to say this continuity is constructed in the mind, or is constructed by the thought stream, and yet it's just this. Where's a millionth of a second ago? It doesn't exist. Where's a millionth of a second to come? It doesn't exist. It's just this little sliver of light between non-existence and non-existence.
Is it light or is it dark? Is it light or is it dark?
Well, I think as a metaphor, I'm going to say, and I'm going to stick to this as a metaphor, which is my get-out clause. This is this little sliver of light, or if you like, this little sliver of existence between dark and dark, or non-existence and non-existence. I'm going to stick to that. But
maybe the non-existence is the wisdom of an empty mind.
say that again.
Maybe the non-existence is the wisdom of an emptied mind. You know, when the thoughts
I think that's
plumb.
I think that's sufficiently incomprehensible to me to make it into my Zen phrase book. Yeah, that's great. Yeah, absolutely. Maybe it is. And still, there is just this. And puzzling over what may or may not be a very deep Zen saying there, is what's arising. Absolutely, yeah. Weight of glass in hand. Sensation of water on tongue. Sound of glass being put there. That's all there is. One of the things that may be noticed about both spiritual and religious paths is that they tend to evolve increasing complexity. This is totally simple. It's unfathomable, but it's totally simple.
So if there is no relationship, what is empathy?
Empathy is empathy. Empathy is, I mean, the most obvious, I mean, it might sound a bit crass, but the most obvious thing to say is empathy is a feeling that arises.
And
It doesn't arise in certain
rejection then?
cases, it doesn't arise to psychopaths. Sorry, what was that?
So isn't it also, what, isn't it projection then? Empathy?
Empathy?
Yeah.
Oh gosh. Oh, that's a good question. It's a sort of psychological question, isn't it? I would say not. No, I would say that projection probably interferes with empathy. Could we say empathy is a form of love? Would that work?
Well, everything is love really, but like...
Yeah, but not everything looks like it. Empathy looks a bit more like love than dog shit does. Somebody once asked me whether unconditional love also included dog shit, and when I said yes, she was very pleased. She said, yeah, that's what I wanted to hear.
Yeah, to me it seems, you know, when people talk about narcissism and empathy on opposite ends of a spectrum, or
I don't get
or
that.
is it psychology?
Echoists are opposite end of the spectrum from narcissists, if we want to talk in those terms. Echoists.
What's that?
Echo and Narcissus. So Narcissus, if you like, I mean, I know this is kind of very, very simplistic, but an echo, you could say a narcissistic has too much self-regard and an echoist doesn't have enough, and they're both very unhealthy.
Oh, what's an echo? Oh, right.
Well, Echo and Narcissus.
You mean from the... Okay. I've never heard that term before. That's quite interesting.
They're a whole, you can probably, not probably, I'm quite certain you can take tests on the internet if you want to, like you can for everything else, to determine whether you're an echoist or a narcissist or nicely in between. The healthy psyche comes out, you know, fairly in the middle, so you need to have a certain level of narcissism to function healthily. Too much, you know, that's pretty bad, but too little and you become an echoist, and it's like you have
How does echoism not manifest?
Oh, I wish I hadn't started this now, because
Well, you're a psychologist, aren't you?
how does echoism, what do you know what to do now? Hey, how should I vote in the election? I don't know, tell me. I mean, you're really good on politics, tell me how to vote in the election. Oh God, I can't choose from this menu, why don't you choose for me? I mean,
I see.
I'm sorry, it's a bit of a caricature.
No,
you get the point.
I get what you're saying, yeah, that's
So
really
the
interesting,
narcissist, if you like, you know, admires their own voice and everything else about themselves too much. The echoist has no voice. I mean, that's the point of echo. All she can do is echo. So, yeah.
That's really interesting, yeah. Excellent. Thanks for that little play.
Where did that start?
Well,
Without
I think we're talking about
Stephanie?
empathy.
Oh, empathy.
Yeah. And,
Well, I feel like saying if you don't like, what did I say? Empathy, to me it's a kind of certain kind of manifestation of love.
yeah.
If you don't like that, then come up with your own damn definition.
Yeah, it's projection.
Okay, we'll disagree about that. I would say that projection would always get in the way of empathy, that true empathy is impossible where projection's going on.
Well, true empathy is impossible, really, if there's no relationship. Because when people talk about empathy, they say it's like they can feel what someone else is feeling.
Yeah,
But there's no relationship.
so
Because you don't know what someone else feels.
it depends what you mean by relationship, doesn't it? I mean, I would say that an act of empathy, I mean, this is going down somewhere which I feel like we shouldn't go down too far. I mean, we can go down in a little way, it's a bit of an indulgence, but I would say that, you know, empathy is impossible in the absence of the feeling of some kind of relating, let me put it like that, take the noun out of it, put the verb into it. empathy is impossible without some kind of, because empathy is in itself a form of relating.
Relating, but you're coming from.
Can I
the
try
self.
and kind of make a pathetic attempt? It probably is a pathetic attempt to link this up to non-duality, because I've already said when this is seen, it's quite likely that a certain level of neuroticism may collapse or die away. And I would say again, neuroticism gets in the way of empathy.
Okay.
So there may be an expectation that there's more empathy, or more possibility of empathy when this is seen, but in a way, so what? You know, everything is what it is, and it just arises and falls away.
That makes a sort of sense, yeah. In this story, like there's been a recognition that, you know, that there was belief that I could feel what other people were feeling
Okay.
in my relationships, but that's sort of gone away.
Yeah.
But in the story as it is now, it seems as though I'm better able to apparently relate to people,
Right.
whilst recognizing that I don't know what they're feeling.
Right. What's the evidence that you see that apparently there's more of a relating to other people now?
Well, it seems to be more within the play. It seems that there's it's nicer. Like it's like more. Like relationships or conversations seem to be more in sync.
Right.
Like an understanding of the conversation.
That's a great phrase, by the way, you know, that they seem to be more in sync.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Well, so I would trust that. I mean, that evidence sounds trustworthy. You know.
Well, I'm not saying that I don't see that. Like, you know, there's nothing to trust. It's just how it's happening.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's just a description of what's been going on.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Sounds both coherent and in a way to be expected. Because, you know, the kind of solidity of the person with all its barnacles and all its neuroses and all its anxieties and so forth, that can't fail. That, you know, that must, to some extent, get in the way of what is actually a kind of natural going out to someone else, which is what empathy is.
Yeah.
Unless you're a psychopath, as I've already said.
I think we could have this conversation without getting embroiled in this concept of empathy, which I find a very difficult
Yeah,
concept.
okay.
I'm not sure this is actually really adding anything to anything really.
No, it probably isn't. I doubt whether anything in this
Well,
is
yeah.
adding anything to anything.
I think empathy is a very difficult concept, and psychologists don't have an agreement on what they mean by it. And I think to try and dualise between empathy and psychopathy, I think is not simplistic.
Yeah, psychologists may argue about this till the cows come home, and yet human beings kind of do, in a way, naturally feel when there is, when they're, I want to say when they're in a field of empathy. I don't know whether that's just because you feel, yeah, but yeah.
I think what's important is Reef's experience of feeling happier in his relationships with people now versus some previous experience, which is what I'm hearing.
You feel what?
Is that what you're saying?
Well, there's no relationship. I mean, it's just what's happening. And in the story, the relationships are more in sync. And there's less you could say, fighting or less sort of like separation. It's just, you know, what's happening, and in a much easier way.
That enables you to get along with people better, is that what you're saying?
Oh yeah, I guess you could say that, yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, and I'd say that's kind of quite common. And also, what appears to be the opposite of it, but isn't really the opposite, is also common, which is that, you know, this can fracture some relationships completely. I've given the example in at least one other meeting, you know, somebody I was talking to who had spectacularly, in inverted commas, completely accidentally blown up their marriage. And, you know, it's involved, you know, a big family, you know, extended family as well. They had, if you like, destroyed their life, that part of their life, unintentionally, in inverted commas, and it was quite obvious that some energy, you know, which they couldn't resist, you know, had brought them to do something which anybody would have said, well, that is spectacularly stupid to do that, unless you actually want to blow up your marriage. It was like this energy just, you know. And destroyed a situation which was obviously untenable to them, but on a kind of head level they couldn't come to terms with that. So the tiger did it for them.
It sounds like they were suppressed and...
Yeah, absolutely, and then they weren't. Yeah, definitely, yeah. Suppressed for a long time, and then suddenly they weren't, because the tiger of non-duality had seized them. Yeah. And broken the constraints. Yeah. Tigers are very powerful beasts. Yeah.
Yeah, because in relationships can be so much like trying to control the other.
Yeah.
And when someone doesn't want that anymore, it's quite difficult.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's
Yeah.
really, you know, like there's a...
Well, this is freedom, yeah, the wind of freedom. It's the opposite of control.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
It's,
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, I feel that so-called maintaining relationships can feel quite manipulative. It's, you know, trying to make people feel a certain way.
Yeah. Playing the game.
Yeah.
So again, you know, this can be really challenging. It can be really challenging for other apparent people in our apparent lives, as it becomes more and more difficult and maybe impossible to play those
And
games.
it's quite a built-up thing, like it tends to be, as you know, as a social thing, but also, you know, within relationships, and then, you know, maintaining those relationships, and it's a continual compromise. But to me at this point, what, you know, I would say is like the kindest thing you can do is just, you know, be real.
Yeah.
You know, just be straight up, and then they'll see, and then they can be straight up potentially, you know, or their relationship could break down, but that might be even better.
Yeah, well, yeah. I mean, the only thing that I would take out of that is the decision. It sounds like that's a decision. Well, I'm going to be more real. Actually, you know, what happens is what happens.
Yeah.
But in the case I was referring to, it's just an unstoppable force.
Yeah.
Had nothing to do with what the person was apparently intending. And when I say apparently, I mean in terms of their conscious self was intending.
Yeah, that was
They
coming from
accidentally destroyed their marriage in one magnificent action. Took them about 4 minutes to destroy marriage of some years. Yeah. Unintentionally. But anyone with 3 brain cells to rub together could have said, if you don't want to destroy a marriage, don't do that. Energy. Purifying energy. Ooh, that's a dangerous word for me to use. But there's a character here that can't help making a judgment about that. You know, that was a purification. Unbelievably uncomfortable and distressing purification, but a purification nevertheless. Ooh, I'll have the Advaita police on my neck for saying that, won't I? Maybe.
And is there like a deepening? It, almost like something is tangled up and then it kind of it's kind of
Did you tell us?
it's like a bit of smoke and then it kind of
More clarity, the smoke clears.
yeah, it just you are like the smoke and then you kind of disappear. It just you kind of I don't know. I'm just putting into words, but it's hard to.
In the experience of the character who remains, there can appear to be a deepening. I mean, there isn't really a deepening. I mean, this is seen or it isn't seen.
Yeah.
The lightning flashes, there's the revelation, whatever. In the experience, I mean, assuming physical death doesn't take place at the same time, then in the experience of the character who remains, yes, of course, there can be the experience of changing, of deepening, of transforming. Yeah. It's kind of not important, but then the character might make it important.
Mm.
Yeah, I think we make all sorts of things important. I mean, my next cup of tea might be colossally important. But to say, in a way, to say that, you know, there can be a deepening to this seeing is erroneous. There can be a deepening in all sorts of experiences around it that the character may perceive, but no, this.
It's not a deepening
What we're
of
talking
these-
about itself, you know, it cannot be shallower and it cannot be deeper. It simply is.
It's like clearing.
Yeah, there can.
Or-
Yeah. I mean, for example,
But a more of a,
Yeah.
though it's kind of whatever is there starts to be less. Have less and less and less power somehow. I don't know
Yeah.
how to put it.
yeah, definitely a kind of clearing of neuroses, for example. Yeah, absolutely.
And it can happen like slowly, doesn't
Yeah.
it?
Yeah, all the whatever we want to call it, all the psychological stuff, whatever, the barnacles attached to the hull or something, yeah, definitely. Yeah. Some of them can fall off slowly in the apparent passing of time, yeah. In the biography of what appears to be a person, yeah. Crikey, we've got 3 minutes left for that absolute killer question. Or quotation, or whatever it might be. Nursery rhyme, whatever. just call it a day then. Thank you for being here.
Thank you.
Thanks, Richard.